Hi, and welcome to our video presentation about passage 42 of the Most Holy Book. It's also a reply to a talk given many years ago by Mr Ali Nakhjavani in New Zealand. You can watch his talk on YouTube, but briefly Mr Ali Nakhjavani was teaching that passage 42 of the Most Holy Book was about the law of absolute power and succession. He was also teaching that this passage shows the termination and the end of the guardianship. So in this presentation, we'll show you how this passage deals with the subject of endowments. We will also give a wider scope to the word ahsan, or branch, and give you an introduction to the local and secondary houses of justice. So let's begin. First of all, in his talk, Ali Nakhjavani didn't read the passage in question to the audience. So I would like to read to you this passage. I think this verse deserves to be read in a Baha'i assembly, and it won't be of any inconvenience to anyone because it's a short one, and it will also give the audience a chance to ask questions. So here is passage 42 in Arabic. قد رجعت الأوقاف المختصة للخيرات إلى الله مظهر الآيات. ليس لأحد أن يتصرف فيها إلا بعد إذن مطلع الوحي، ومن بعده يرجع الحكم إلى الأغصان، ومن بعدهم إلى بيت العدل إن تحقق أمره في البلاد، ليصرفوها في البقاع المرتفعة في هذا الأمر، وفيما أمر به من لدن مقتدر قدير، وإلا ترجع إلى أهل البهاء الذين لا يتكلمون إلا بعد إذنه، ولا يحكمون إلا بما حكم الله في هذا اللوح. أولئك أولياء النصر بين السماوات والأراضين، ليصرفوها فيما حدد في الكتاب من لدن عزيز كريم.
And here it is again in English. Endowments dedicated to charity revert to God, the revealer of signs. None have the right to dispose of them without leave from him who is the dwelling place of revelation. After him, this authority shall pass to the Aqsan, and after them to the house of justice, should it be established in the world by them, that they may use these endowments for the benefit of the places which have been exalted in this cause, and for whatsoever hath been enjoined upon them by him who is the God of might and power. Otherwise the endowments shall revert to the people of Baha, who speak not except by his leave, and judge not save in accordance with what God hath decreed in this tablet. Lo, they are the champions of victory betwixt heaven and earth, that they may use them in the manner that hath been laid down in the book by God, the mighty, the bountiful. So first and foremost, this passage in the Most Holy Book is about endowments dedicated to charity. This is the subject of the verse, not the line of succession. The subject of succession or line of succession is dealt with elsewhere in the Baha'i writings, such as the Book of the Covenant of Baha'u'llah and the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha, which is considered by Baha'is to be inseparable from the Most Holy Book.
And endowments are different from Huququllah, or the right of God. There is another passage that deals with Huququllah in the Most Holy Book, but this passage deals with the endowments. I say endowments are not Huququllah because some believers seem to be confused and have been told that this passage 42, talks about the absolute authority and the Huququllah. Endowment is an investment in real estate that is sometimes bought by the national or local spiritual assembly, or given as a gift by the believers to the assemblies. These endowments are registered in the name of these assemblies, and if those assemblies do not exist, they can be held under the name of a believer or a group of believers on behalf of the community, until an assembly is formed. In a letter to George Latimer, the Guardian Shoghi Effendi wrote, "There is a difference between taxes and spiritual offerings. The House of Justice has certain revenues, such as inheritance shares, fees, and fines. These are the taxes which, according to the Agdas, go directly not to the guardian but to the House of Justice. According to the Master's will, which complements the Agdas, the huquq goes only to the guardian."
Many endowments were made in the days of Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi. For example, Shoghi Effendi in one of his letters to New Zealand wrote, "The establishment of Baha'i endowments in the Dominion of New Zealand is yet another responsibility devolving upon their selected national representatives, a responsibility which should be discharged prior to the emergence of an independent National Assembly in that distant and promising land." And in another letter to the believers in Alaska, the Guardian Shoghi Effendi wrote, "As regards local endowments, these can be a piece of land or a building offered or purchased in any place in Alaska. However, as the Friends have 6 years in which to accomplish their plan, and the most important work of all is the teaching work, he would not advise that they begin by spending their money on these projects unless somebody has a piece of land or building which they wish to give. The site for the temple is much more important. It should be near the capital of Alaska within easy distance, or preferably in it, so that the Friends can gather there when the temple is built for their services. If the 20-acre national endowment is suitably close to the city, it can be used as the temple site, and another piece of land, smaller in area, and anywhere in Alaska, be acquired as the national endowment." In fact, one of the objectives of the 10-year crusades that can be found in the Citadel of Faith by Shoghi Effendi was to establish a national spiritual assembly in various countries and to establish national Baha'i endowments by those same national spiritual assemblies. So endowments can be held by a believer or group of believers on behalf of a community until a local or national spiritual assembly is established and a transfer can be made.
So back to passage 42. The passage say that the authority to dispose of the endowments belongs to Baha'u'llah, and after him the authority pass on to the ihsan. The word authority here means the authority to use these endowments, and not absolute authority, or the authority to interpret the sacred writings, or the authority to legislate and fill in the gaps in the Most Holy Book, because all the Baha'is know that the authority to interpret is in the Guardian's domain, while the authority to legislate is in the domain of the Universal House of Justice. So the authority to dispose of these endowments pass on from Baha'u'llah to the ihsan. And the word ihsan in the Baha'i Faith is a very interesting word. All Baha'is understand that the meanings of the word of God are manifold, and in every place a particular significance has been chosen. Any Baha'i who read the Book of Certitude, or anyone who become a Baha'i and read the Book of Certitude, will understand the importance of symbolism and emblems in the Baha'i Faith. Because without this understanding, how can we explain the signs of Judgment Day of the previous religions? So briefly, in the Book of Certitude, you will find the following. Baha'u'llah wrote, "By the terms sun and moon mentioned in the writings of the prophets of God, is not meant solely the sun and moon of the visible universe. Nay, rather manifold are the meanings they have intended for these terms. In every instance, they have attached to them a particular significance." In another place he wrote, "In every instance, he hath given the term heaven a special meaning, the significance of which is revealed to none save those that have been initiated into the divine mysteries and have drunk from the chalice of immortal life." So the meaning of the words of God cannot be exhausted, and in every instance, a special meaning is attached. Only those who are the chosen interpreters can reveal its manifold purpose for mankind. The word ihsan is one of these words that have many meanings in the Baha'i writings, and have a particular significance in every instance, and the significance of which is known to the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, and its purpose and benefit for us can be explained to us by the guardian. Most Baha'is understand that the word ihsan means the male descendants of Baha'u'llah, and this understanding comes from a letter written on behalf of the guardian to Dr. Muhli Schlegel, who was translating the Book of Covenant of Baha'u'llah into German for the German believers. In this letter, which can be found in the Light of Divine Guidance, we find this. "Dear Dr. Muhli Schlegel, I'm directed by the Guardian to acknowledge the receipt of your letter dated August 29th, and to express his appreciation of your highly valued efforts for the translation of the Kitab-i-Ahad into German. He hopes that copies of this precious tablet will soon be made available to all the friends, and that through its study, their knowledge of the teachings will be deepened and their zeal for their spread stimulated and sustained. The term Afnan means literally small branch and refers to the relatives of the Bab, both men and women. As the Bab's only son died while in infancy, the former had no direct descendants. The Afnan are therefore all directly related to the Bab. As to Aghsan, it also means branch, but it is a bigger branch than Afnan. It refers to Baha'u'llah's descendants. The Kitab-i-Ahad is, as you know, Baha'u'llah's Book of Covenant. It is entirely written in his own handwriting. So this is the specific meaning of the word Aghsan that is found in the passage in the Book of the Covenant, which the authorized interpreter Shoghi Effendi gave to Dr. Muhli Schlegel, who inquired about the tablet as he was translating the Book of the Covenant into German for the German believers. The word Aghsan is found in many places in the Baha'i writings, one of which is in the tablet of Baha'u'llah. In this tablet, Baha'u'llah teaches, "Since the believers and the loved ones of God are like unto branches and leaves of this holy tree, therefore whatever befalls upon the original stalk will also befall upon the branches, twigs, and leaves." Baha'u'llah Al-Wah Mubarakah. In this verse, Baha'u'llah states that all the believers in him are branches, and branches not limited to blood relatives. Abdu'l-Baha in several tablets leaves no doubt that branch refers to all the believers that are sincere believers in Baha'u'llah. In particular, Abdu'l-Baha explains that sonship is divided into two, physical and spiritual. The first is made of elements, and the latter is of spirit. So he teaches the line of descendants is divided into two kinds. One is the physical descendants and the other spiritual. One is born of water and earth, and the other is born of soul and heart. Abdu'l-Baha, Ma'ida Asmani, Volume 5. Regarding the same subject, the following passage may be meditated upon. The branches, Aghsan, are not limited to certain individuals. They have succession. Abdu'l-Baha, Ma'ida Asmani, Volume 2. You will also find this wonderful piece from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. O dear one of Abdu'l-Baha, be the son of thy father, and be the fruit of that tree. Be a son that hath been born of his soul and heart, and not only of water and clay. A real son is such a one as hath branched from the spiritual part of man. I ask God that thou mayest be at all times confirmed and strengthened. And also, God in his infinite goodness has exalted us to so much honor and has made us masters over the material world. Shall we then become her slaves? Nay, rather, let us claim our birthright and strive to live the life of the spiritual sons of God. Abdu'l-Baha, Paris Talks. So, in this spiritual sense, the word Aghsan can have a deeper spiritual meaning, which can be related to a spiritual hereditary or sonship. And that also relates to the hereditary principle and the institution of the guardianship and the spiritual office of the guardian in the world order of Baha'u'llah.
Regarding the hereditary principle, this is what the guardian Shoghi Effendi wrote in the world order of Baha'u'llah. In the verses of the Kitab-i-Agdas, the implications of which clearly anticipate the institution of the guardianship, in the explanation which Abdu'l-Baha in one of his tablets has given to, and the emphasis he has placed upon the hereditary principle and the law of primogeniture as having been upheld by the prophets of the past, in these we can discern the faint glimmerings and discover the earliest intimation of the nature and working of the administrative order, which the will of Abdu'l-Baha was at a later time destined to proclaim and formally establish. We can see then from this passage written by Shoghi Effendi in the World Order of Baha'u'llah that the Most Holy Book clearly anticipates the institution of the guardianship and that Abdu'l-Baha proclaimed it and formally established it. Moreover, it also shows that the hereditary principle was upheld by all the prophets of the past. When we look in the history of the past religions, we can see that when prophets did not have children, they chose a branch from another bloodline. For example, Moses appointed Joshua, Jesus appointed Peter, and Muhammad appointed Ali to be their successors upon their death.
In some answered questions, containing the answers given by Abdu'l-Baha, we can find these passages. Now Muhammad was the root and Ali the branch, like Moses and Joshua. And also, and that sun of reality and that moon of guidance, both like Christ, set on the horizon of the greatest martyrdom and ascended to the kingdom of God. And this passage refers to the Bab and Jinabi Qudus. And so, when these prophets did not have a branch from their lineal descendants, they chose another branch to succeed them. And this is the spiritual hereditary principle, which, as Abdu'l-Baha has written, has been invariably upheld by the law of God.
This hereditary principle explains the following passage in the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha. Thus should the firstborn of the guardian of the cause of God not manifest himself the truth of these words, the child is the secret essence of its sire. That is, should he not inherit the spiritual essence within him, the guardian of the cause of God, and his glorious lineage not be matched with a goodly character, then must he, the guardian of the cause of God, choose another branch to succeed him.
So before we continue with passage 42 of the Most Holy Book, I'll finish this matter with this passage from the World Order of Baha'u'llah by Shoghi Effendi regarding the hereditary principle. Divorced from the institution of the guardianship, the World Order of Baha'u'llah would be mutilated and permanently deprived of that hereditary principle, which, as Abdu'l-Baha has written, has been invariably upheld by the law of God. In all the divine dispensations, he states in a tablet addressed to a follower of the faith in Persia, the eldest son hath been given extraordinary distinctions. Even the station of prophethood hath been his birthright. Without such an institution, the integrity of the faith would be imperiled, and the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. Its prestige would suffer. The means required to enable it to take a long, uninterrupted view over a series of generations would be completely lacking, and the necessary guidance to define the sphere of the legislative action of its elected representatives would be totally withdrawn. So back to passage 42. In regards to this passage, we can safely say that the authority to dispose of the endowments returned to the center of authority, or the head of the community. So first Abdu'l-Baha and then the guardians of the Baha'i Faith. And the idea that this verse envisages the end of the guardianship is an interpretation that is not made by an authoritative, infallible interpreter, or a guardian, if you like. And when placed under the light of everything that was taught by Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, it does not conform with the spirit of the Baha'i Faith. So the explanation given in the notes at the back of the Most Holy Book regarding this passage was made after the ascension of Shoghi Effendi, and is not part of the sacred text, and is not an authorized interpretation. So referring back again to passage 42, after the Ihsan, the authority to dispose of the endowments goes back to the House of Justice. And so now I will introduce you to the local and the national House of Justice. You should know that the local spiritual assembly and the national spiritual assembly, which hold these endowments, are the embryo of the local House of Justice and the secondary House of Justice. Much like the way the International Baha'i Council, made by Shoghi Effendi, was the embryo of the Universal House of Justice.
This passage can be found in the World Order of Baha'u'llah, written by Shoghi Effendi. Local and national houses of justice. It should be carefully borne in mind that the local as well as the international houses of justice have been expressly enjoined by the Kitab-i-Agdas, that the institution of the National Spiritual Assembly as an intermediary body and referred to in the Master's will as the secondary house of justice has the express sanction of Abdu'l-Baha, and that the method to be pursued for the election of the international and national houses of justice has been set forth by him in his will, as well as in a number of his tablets. Moreover, the institutions of the local and national funds that are now the necessary adjuncts to all local and national spiritual assemblies have not only been established by Abdu'l-Baha in the tablets he revealed to the Baha'is of the Orient, but their importance and necessity have been repeatedly emphasized by him in his utterances and writings. In the next paragraph we find that the spiritual assemblies of today will be replaced in time by the houses of justice and are to all intents and purposes identical and not separate bodies is abundantly confirmed by Abdu'l-Baha himself. He has in fact, in a tablet addressed to the members of the first Chicago Spiritual Assembly, the first elected body instituted in the United States, referred to them as the members of the House of Justice for that city, and has thus with his own pen established beyond any doubt the identity of the present Baha'i spiritual assemblies with the houses of justice referred to by Baha'u'llah. For reasons which are not difficult to discover, it has been found advisable to bestow upon the elected representatives of Baha'i communities throughout the world the temporary appellation of spiritual assemblies, a term which, as the position and aims of the Baha'i Faith are better understood and more fully recognized, will gradually be superseded by the permanent and more appropriate designation of House of Justice. Since Shoghi Effendi referred to the Master's will and testament, that inseparable document for the Most Holy Book, regarding the secondary houses of justice, let's take a look now at the particular passage in the Master's will and testament. And now concerning the house of justice which God hath ordained as the source of all good and freed from all error, it must be elected by universal suffrage, that is, by the believers. Its members must be manifestations of the fear of God and daysprings of knowledge and understanding, must be steadfast in God's faith and the well-wishers of all mankind. By this house is meant the universal house of justice, that is, in all countries a secondary house of justice must be instituted, and these secondary houses of justice must elect the members of the universal one.
Here is the passage from the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha in its original Persian. The word bilad was translated into English as countries by Shoghi Effendi and is highlighted in red. I will bring this up later in the presentation.
Returning to passage 42. After the Aqsan, the authority will pass to the House of Justice, should it be established in the world by then.
Anyone who understands Arabic will tell you that this translation of passage 42, which wasn't made by Shoghi Effendi, is not correct and a bit misleading, because the Arabic text says cities, not the world. When we read the world, we get the sense of the universal house of justice, but if we read cities, we will sense the local house of justice. Bilad is plural, just like the word Aqsan is plural. Ali Nakhjavani mentioned that in the video. He mentioned that Aqsan is plural, but he did not mention that Bilad is plural. In fact, I showed you that the word Bilad in the previous slide. It was used in the Master's will and testament regarding the secondary house of justice, and it was referred to by Shoghi Effendi when he wrote regarding the local and national spiritual assemblies, which was also shown in the previous slides. Here is that passage again about the secondary house of justice being established in all the countries using the word Bilad in its translation by Shoghi Effendi in English. Anton Haddad attempted a translation of the Most Holy Book in the early 1900s, but it wasn't approved by the Guardian, because the Guardian was hoping for a better style and not a literal one. But this is the translation of Anton to show you another alternative translation of the word bilad. I highlighted it in red. So Anthony says when it becomes dominantly established in countries. Here is another alternative translation by Elder made in 1961. He translated the word bilad as throughout the lands.
And that is what had happened in the days of Shoghi Effendi. Whenever he established a local or national spiritual assembly, he went on instructing that assembly to acquire national endowments in its name. Those national spiritual assemblies are the embryos that were meant to develop over time into the secondary house of justice under the direction and guidance of the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, just like the International Baha'i Council. Shoghi Effendi wrote God Passes By, which is an important historical document that he gifted to the West. In it, he explained, just as the formulation of Baha'i constitutions had provided the foundation for the incorporation of Baha'i spiritual assemblies, so did the recognition accorded by local and national authorities to the elected representatives of Baha'i communities pave the way for the establishment of national and local Baha'i endowments.
So back to passage 42 of the Most Holy Book. Otherwise, it reverts to the people of Baha. The people of Baha in this passage are the spiritual assemblies. Abdu'l-Baha stated in one of his tablets, أفقاف مختصة بخيرات قبل تشكيل بيت عدل بمحفل روحاني كمنزه ومقدس إذ شائبة نفساني است راجع. Prior to establishment of the House of Justice, endowments dedicated to charity revert to a spiritual assembly which is freed from traces of desire. There is no other arrangements. This was written by Abdul Hamid Ishraq in his book regarding the hudud and ahkam of the Baha'i Faith.
So as we refer one last time to passage 42 of the Most Holy Book, it is clear that nothing, neither the guardianship nor the aksans, had to end or be terminated. This is because, even in the lifetime of the guardian Shoghi Effendi, endowments were passed on to the local and national spiritual assemblies. We must always seek the true interpretation from the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, and we must always consider the writings in their entirety, rather than picking one passage and rejecting other passages. It's also important that we hold on to those clear fundamental statements so that we do not get misled by faulty interpretation of the ambiguous statements. How can we say this passage speaks of the guardianship ending when everything that the Most Holy Book anticipates, Abdu'l-Baha expounds, and Shoghi Effendi interprets is contrary?
We are now at the end of the presentation. I leave you with few passages from divine revelations. This one is a verse from the Quran, found in the Book of Certitude by Baha'u'llah. How strange! These people with one hand cling to those verses of the Quran and those traditions of the people of certitude which they have found to accord with their inclinations and interests, and with the other, reject those which are contrary to their selfish desires. Believe ye then part of the book, and deny part? And finally, this is from the same book, the most holy book, Kitab-i-Agdas, which we must not measure with our own standards. Whoso interpreteth what hath been sent down from the heaven of revelation, and altereth its evident meaning, he verily is of them that have perverted the sublime word of God,